Welcome back to The Stories Beneath Our Scars by Loopy Loopy. If you haven't listened to Chapter 1 yet, please do so before you continue this video. Chapter 2, Izuku's Scars. It's burned into his brain, the swatch of discolored flesh flicking across the blackness whenever Katsuki closes his eyes. When the nerd had pulled up his sleeve, he hadn't been able to look away. It had taken a hesitant prod from Kirishima's hardened elbow to snap him out of it, back into their study session, but he hadn't been able to focus at all. His ears had stubbornly remained trained on the murmured conversation between Izuku and that kid, trying to catch something, anything that might ease the swirling in his head. But they'd been too far away and too quiet. He'd heard some of the exchange with Aizawa, and briefly considered taking off after the nerd when he left, but he couldn't bring himself to move. It wasn't cowardice, it wasn't. He just didn't know what the fuck to say. And now he couldn't stop thinking about it, mind on autopilot as he levers himself off his chair, snatching up his book and slinging his bag over his shoulder with a gruff good night. He vaguely hears others follow his lead, but spares them no mind. He's distantly aware of the journey to his room, the cadence of his steps, the feelings of the lift wall against his back, the bounce of the mattress as he throws himself onto his bed. He tries to let himself drift off, but his mind is full of scattered thoughts and tumbling emotions that he tries his best to push away until he can't stand it any longer. Sitting up with a frustrated growl, he swipes a hand down his face and abandons his room for the quiet corridor, heedless of his destination. When he collects himself, he's outside Izuku's door, fist poised as if to knock. Scoffing derisively, he spins on his heel, but he only makes it 2 steps before he whirls back around and pushes the door open. "Oi, Dick!" Izuku's head snaps up with a gasp from his position cross-legged on his bed, right arm tucked against his chest, his other hand frozen hovering over his collar. And Katsuki just stands, rigid, eyes boring into the patch of mottled skin on Izuku's shoulder, completely ignoring the darker scar on his arm that had so captured his attention before. He takes a half step, breaking the spell, and Izuku immediately bursts into motion, simultaneously trying to twist to cover himself and scan frantically for a shirt or anything he can pull on to hide his bare skin, blush high on his cheeks, and eyes averted as he babbles excuses. "Sorry, Kachan, I didn't expect anyone to come in while I was doing this, but I need to put on this salve every night, or—" A hand catching his wrist cuts him off, and he freezes, watching from under his fringe as Katsuki's eyes trace the pattern etched in hypopigmented bursts. They're calculating as they trace the shape, but there's something else there, too, that only builds as the seconds pass, echoed in the pinch of his brows and the clench of his jaw. He's realized what the scar is. Izuku can see it in the sudden tightness around his eyes, the ghost of shame that passes through them. He's cut off by a movement, his attempted words of comfort dying on his lips, as fingers trace the outline of puckered skin. Hesitant. Tentative. Izuku can't help how he shudders at the delicate contact, and Katsuki immediately pulls back. Is this okay?" he whispers, low and uncertain, red eyes scanning green for the slightest hint of anything negative. They've been navigating the waters of their new relationship for a few weeks at this point, but it's so new and still fraught with insecurity on his side and anxiety on Izuku's that Katsuki isn't sure where the boundaries are anymore. And Izuku is too choked up to speak, so instead he just nods, holding the blonde's gaze for a long moment to make sure he knows. Katsuki ghosts his fingers against the old scar again, something ugly roiling in his gut, building, clawing its way up into his chest. He knows that if he were to press his palm down, it would be a near-perfect match, can almost smell the singed polyester of an Aldera middle school blazer. He wants to do it, to lay down his hand and confirm the awful, terrible thing he knows he did, and yet his hand trembles, afraid. But Izuku has always known how to read him, and a smaller hand brushes the back of his, not forcing, but coaxing him down until his palm and fingers are flush to gnarled skin. And Katsuki's chest heaves, that ugliness of regret clawing free in the form of a sob. Izuku is quick to try and soothe, to tell him it's okay, worry edging his tone, but... "I'm sorry," Katsuki chokes out, head dropping as his eyes screw shut against the rare sting of tears. "I'm so fucking sorry. I was..." Another twisted sob, and the hand over his gives a gentle squeeze as it trembles, to anchor, to reassure, to let him know that he's listening as he collects himself. "I was such an asshole to you. I couldn't understand you weren't looking down on me, and I treated you like shit. You never deserved any of it. I was so far up my own fucking ego that I didn't even know I'd burned you like this until now. I'm so fucking sorry." His throat tightens around a painful croak, but a gentle voice encourages him to breathe, fingers entering his periphery and coming to rest on his knee, tapping a slow rhythm until he's found an even keel again. Katsuki watches as a single tear drops onto one of the scars on Izuku's hand, then another and another as the fine tremors threaten to return. He's crying in earnest now, so he barely registers the hand cupping his cheek, thumbing away the few tears still falling. "I know, Katsuki," Izuku whispers, tilting forward to rest his forehead against the blonde's. "But you've been apologizing for a long time, you know." That gets Katsuki's attention, and he lifts his head, backing up and narrowing his eyes in confusion and no small amount of suspicion, which stings just a little. "You've changed since middle school," Izuku reminds him. "Do you really think I would have kissed you if I thought you hadn't?" Katsuki shakes his head, struck dumb by the conviction shining in overbright green eyes, brimming with tears of their own. "Your actions have said sorry so many times." And suddenly Katsuki's being pulled forward, unbalanced as he falls against a strong chest, arms wrapping around him, a weight settling on his head. He freezes immediately, still not used to this kind of touch. But as circles are traced in his back, he finds himself relaxing, and his eyes fall on the abandoned pot of salve sitting forgotten by Izuku's knee. "Hey, Deku." He feels the vibrations of the responding hum against his head, and pulls back, picking up the pot and gesturing to it. "You need any help?" The answering smile is a gentle thing, soft and warm, and full of so much affection that Katsuki almost wants to look away, still not sure if he deserves this. "Yeah, thanks, Kachan." It's quiet in the room as Katsuki rubs a thin layer of the herbal-smelling salve into the old scar, careful to ensure that all of the skin is covered. Izuku's eyes have fallen closed, allowing Katsuki free rein to really look at how he's changed, eyes tracing muscles and other scars, until he finds himself drawn to the newest, the ragged swatch plastered across his arm. He knows when it happened, had seen the awful state of Izuku's arms when the idiot had lunged for him. But he'd never actually seen the permanent reminder until earlier, and now that he's up close, his heart squeezes painfully, anxiety threatening his lungs with iron bands. Before he knows it, his fingers have moved to ghost against it, only just aware of the eyes on him as Izuku tilts his head in curiosity. "Gotta do this one too," Katsuki reasons pragmatically, ignoring the bass in his tone and the way his throat tightens around the words. Izuku just hums, this time watching, as Katsuki spreads the salve over the mottled skin, eyes focused only on the task, touch so tender and careful as if Izuku were something precious. And Izuku can't help the tears that well and spill over, scrubbing at his eyes with his free hand and blubbering quiet apologies and thank yous as Katsuki presses a lingering kiss to his forehead, hand coming up to cup the back of Izuku's head, fingers brushing through green curls as he whispers that it's okay. "I'll be better." He promises this, vows it in the confines of his mind, as he cradles Izuku's right hand, dropping butterfly kisses against each of the scars. I'll have your back like I know you have mine. He works his way up the scars on Izuku's forearm, each one soothed with the press of lips, until he's brushed his thumb against the training camp scar, following up with his lips, tracing the border and ghosting across the middle. I'll never let you get hurt like this again. And finally, a kiss against the burn scar on his shoulder, before he rests his forehead against it, a final promise made. I'll never hurt you like this again. Ever. When he pulls back, green eyes are once again sparkling with tears, as if he heard every word of Katsuki's promises, but neither say anything as the blonde merely wipes them away, and Izuku, who feels his heart might just burst, chases him for a kiss that's full of acceptance, gratitude, and love.